Hello, hello, hello. This is Adriane Berg, and this is the Ageless Traveler. And today we are kicking off a new series called Travel Bros. Yeah, it is wonderful that most of the people over 60 that are traveling are women. Terrific, no problem. But what about the guys? And so this is more unusual than our usual series, which we generally have 3 or 4 podcasts in a row. I hope to never end this series of Travel Bros. But most important, as Mary Poppins says, is well begun is half done. And so we are going to begin very well. We're beginning with Don Mankin. Now, he is a real seasoned traveler. In fact, National Geographic, Riding the Hula Hula to the Arctic Ocean, a guide to 50 extraordinary adventures for the seasoned traveler, is his book. He's also a travel writer. He has many, many travel outlets. And of course, he's an adventurer in his own right. So thank you so much, Don, for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Well, we do talk about travel. We talk about ageless travel. You talk about the seasoned traveler. But when the marketing companies look at it, they're looking at women. They're forgetting an entirely important demographic. So how much travel have you actually done in your life? I think it's a lot.
Oh, for many years, I was a professor and then a dean, and then I would travel. So most of my traveling was confined to summer break. But then I left that, about 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And that's when I started seriously traveling and seriously writing about my travel. Since then, I do sometimes as many as 6 significant major trips per year. So I've been doing a lot of travel. I spend, I would say, one night out of 3 or one night out of 4 on the road. So that's that's a
very
and I've been
significant.
and I've been doing that for several years now.
Yeah,
most of them are with my wife. We just did a trip by ourselves to Australia and New Zealand, including a 1-week self-drive through Tasmania, which I wrote about. We just got back from a group trip on a converted tugboat in the Great Bear Rainforest of northern coastal British Columbia. So it was us and I think 3 or 4 other couples on the boat. And we've done larger groups, adventure cruises like a river cruise, small boat cruises. On occasion, I'll travel by myself. Like a few years ago, I did a road trip to the American Southwest with my grandnephew, who was 24 years old.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, blew his mind, absolutely blew his mind. He lives in Florida, never seen anything at all like the Grand Canyon and the rest of the American Southwest.
So let's unpack some of this. Let's take a look at the latest long trip that you took, which is with your wife. It was in Australia. How do you pack for it? How do you prepare for it? What do you do about weighing yourself during the trip and staying healthy? Give us your hints and tips.
Well, boy, that's a challenge. So it was Australia and New Zealand. Packing is always a challenge. Like I said, I've been doing this for years, many trips, and packing is always somewhat anxiety provoking because you're always concerned that you're going to miss something critical. And I do, even now, like I arrived in Vancouver on this last trip and I realized I didn't pack enough medication to last me through the trip. A real rookie mistake. So, but I still, yeah, I know. But that's another story. I actually worked around it, and that's another story for you if you're interested. But I have a packing list, and I do a packing list for my wife. I usually know better what the demands of the trip are going to be. So we do a lot of outdoor stuff. Sometimes we do stuff in where the weather can be inhospitable. I'm more tolerant of that than my wife is, so I want to make sure that she has warm enough clothes. She has clothes that if it's raining or we're out on a Zodiac getting splashed, she'll be reasonably comfortable. So I put a lot of thought into packing, and I always overpack. I do not follow Rick Steves about packing light. For me, I pack for the conditions. I want to make sure I have the gear that I need for the trip. I want to make sure that I have dry clothes if I need it. And so that means I'm not packing light. I mean, I'm packing up to the limit. One suitcase and a backpack. That's my limit. But within those 2 things, I fill them up.
Yes. Now, before we take a little break, and I'm actually going to talk about luggage free, which is a way to get your luggage to a hotel or an itinerary without schlepping it yourself. We'll talk about that in a minute. I must get back to your comment about your workaround when it came to forgetting your pills. How did you work around it? Because that is pretty devastating.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, so we were in a hotel in Vancouver, and the next day we were taking a flight to British Columbia, which was the starting point for this trip in British Columbia. And so I discovered this the night before when I took my evening meds, and I said, "Oh my God, I only got meds here for 3 days rather than a full week." So I got up early in the morning, I couldn't sleep because I was anxious. I went down to the front desk and I asked the receptionist, if there was a drugstore, close by. And he said there was a 24-hour drugstore that was about a mile away, and that he was sure that they would be able to work something out to get me the temporary meds to cover the trip. So I took an Uber over. They're all set up for it. You have to download an app, and you use the app to with a physician who goes over the meds that you need, asking for proof. So you need to show a copy of the prescription, either the bottles, which of course I didn't have, but I was able to get online and get a copy of it. In about an hour, I was able to get a 5-day supply of all the meds that I needed. It cost a bit of money, but I was set. I was set for the rest of the trip. So it was aggravating and a little bit expensive, but I was able to do it. No, I don't know. That was in Canada. I don't know.
Yes, I want to use that magic word, Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we work actually with a company called Ageless RX, because here in the United States, there are types of medications that you cannot get. In Canada, there are simply different kinds of prescriptions you could get for different ailments that are sometimes very beneficial, but not yet ready in the U.S. So Canada is really a very good place to do that. But that is possible in many parts of the world. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and during that break, I'm going to tell you about luggage free. So you guys, don't you go anywhere. If you take long trips or travel through different climate zones the way I do, you don't want to schlep a lot of luggage. Well, luggage free ships to many of the hotels in the world and mostly all the cruise ships. I've been recommending luggage free for years to my friends and family, and I always hear the best rave reviews. So you visit agelesstraveler.com, products and services, to access luggage free, get all the information, and stop schlepping. So we are back now, and you are packing heavy or light or however you want, or you're sending your luggage ahead. You're going on your great adventure. Where should you go? Well, Don Mankin, who is our guest today, has written a book all about it with a very intriguing title. National Geographic's Riding the Hula Hula to the Arctic Ocean. So first you're going to have to unpack that title for us. What exactly does it mean, Don?
Okay, so the Hula Hula is a river runs from the Brooks Range in Alaska to the Arctic Ocean. It was named by 2 Hawaiian whalers who got stuck in the ice in the 19th century. And they were there the whole winter, and they were homesick, so they named the river the Hula Hula. So that's how the name came about. So what you do is you fly into the Brooks Range. It's a rafting trip. And for 11 days, we rode from the Brooks Range down through the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to the coast, Arctic Ocean. And then off the coast, there was a gravel island where we ended up and camped for one night. And then a plane came in and picked us up. Now, this was a pretty big deal because right before this trip, I got some scary medical news. And I was in the middle of doing tests to find out what was going on. But the results from the tests were not going to get back in time for me to take this trip. So I didn't, I was really distracted. So I wanted to cancel the trip. But my doctor and my wife both said, the doctor said, there isn't anything that these results could come back that would have any bearing on this trip whatsoever. And, my wife said, go on the trip. So I went on the trip, somewhat anxious about, these test results. And I got on the trip, and maybe the second night out, I walked up a ridge overlooking the camp. We camped right by the river, and I'm overlooking the camp. And, the scenery is just spectacular. And it's an Arctic summer night. So it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was still light outside. And I'm looking, and I can see a grizzly bear walking on a ridge opposite, across the river. And, and I'm just looking around. And I said, oh, yeah, that's what I remember. I have some medical tests that are a source of some anxiety. And I said, and this is the stupid thing. I said, I wonder, but I'm not feeling anxious about it. I wonder, can I make myself anxious? I mean, this is stupid. And I actually started to probe a little bit, and nothing happened. I was fine. And of course, I stopped. I mean, I sort of realized, how dumb that was. But I stopped and I realized I was completely in the moment, and it was one of those Zen moments where I was the reality and everything else was something else. And it completely transformed my whole perspective on the trip, and to a certain extent transformed my perspective on travel in general and how do you deal with being in the moment, blocking out what's going on, back in what's called the real world. But, when you're on that trip, the real world is where you're at.
Yes.
And so that's why that's why I called it riding. I mean, it was a real sort of adventure. And the book, so that's the title. The title was based upon that trip. The book includes 50 trips. They're all adventure trips for the most part, ranging from cycling trips in Tuscany, kayaking trips in the Canadian North, just all kinds of trips like that. Half of them were written by me, and half of them were contributed by other people, including my co-author, who also wrote several chapters. So that's the book. It's basically adventure travel, and all over the world, everywhere in the world, including Antarctica.
And of course, you will have that in the show notes for those of you who are interested in the book. You don't have to take the title down now. You'll see it right on our website and in the show notes. But I have to piggyback on something you said, Don, from my own experience. I have been criticized, and I just said something about this on YouTube, for catering to people who love to travel. And many people, including yesterday, someone said to me, why are you spending your time on this? You're a lawyer, you're a broadcaster. You could really talk about the issues of aging and poor people and food and all this. And there is a reason. There is a reason. And that reason is I have never felt so alive. And I don't think anybody else feels so alive.
Exactly.
When they are traveling. It is transformative. And if I can create materials that sponsors want to pay for and bring that to scholarships like Rhodes Scholar does, and let people who cannot travel for the first time, or caregivers travel when they had put that aside in their life, I think it's a real contribution to aging. I really do. I see it in you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, the whole notion of transformative travel is one that I've been very interested in pretty much from the beginning. And I even work with several colleagues. There's a Transformative Travel Council of travel professionals who are sort of into the idea of a transformative travel. And I know it transformed my life. I mean, I went from an anxious kid growing up in Philadelphia whose the only travel I did back then was to take the subway downtown to go to a jazz club.
You're right.
And I did a lot of that. That was pretty cool. And then I started, traveling, and it started pushing the envelope a little bit, doing things that are, more and more challenging. And my whole self-image changed. I mean, I am not the guy that I was when I was, 16 years old growing up in Philadelphia. And I think a lot of it, I mean, it's not just from travel. I mean, it's from a lot of other things as well. But I think travel, especially the adventure travel where you're pushing the envelope a little bit, you're physically and psychologically challenging yourself a little bit. And I think that it's made me a different person. And I have, in fact, I even did a number of years ago, I did interviews with about 35 people whose lives have been transformed by adventure travel. And that was going to be my next book. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a publisher for it. But this whole idea of transformative travel has really been the core of what I've written about and how I think about travel these days.
Well, sure. By the way, sometimes ideas are a little premature. You get there first. So now adventure travel and transformative travel is big, so you might get that publisher. But I did want to also say to all my listeners, it's transformed me in a completely different way, and that is physical. I really was a couch potato and overweight, and they called me a cardiac cripple. At age 75, I did high altitude hiking, and that was a couple of weeks ago in Wasatch Mountains in Utah. If you had said to me when I was 20, 25, 30, even 40, you're going to be a high altitude hiker, I would still be laughing.
Yeah.
So when you get out there and you put one foot in front of another and you take those adventure trips, everything changes. Your ability to be meditative, your ability to be healthier, your longevity, and it's even proven. What are you doing between March 29th and April 12th, 2025? Are you going on safari? Well, we are. Please come with us on our very first Ageless Traveler trip. I will make sure that you see everything that's on your bucket list. We're going with the very famous Colette Tours, one of the oldest tour operators in the United States. They know us, they respect us, and they provide for us everything that we need. Yes, we are going to Kenya. We will see the city of Nairobi. We're going to the Serengeti. We will see the Big Five. We will also have adventures of a lifetime. If you have been studying safari, or even if you have gone on many safaris, this is something really different. So, how do you find out about it and get your special discounts because you're an ageless traveler? Very simple. Go to agelesstraveler.com. That's our website, agelesstraveler.com. Take a look at featured trips. Get the details by clicking right there. You can do everything from inquire, get your question answered, to book right away so that you're going with us. It is a terrific, terrific tour. And by the way, you can also go to the Masai Mara on an optional pre-trip tour. There's a lot more to it than that because there's yet more opportunity if you have longed to trek with the gorillas in Uganda. Yep, we can make that happen too. So please take a look at agelesstraveler.com, featured travel, and go on safari with us. We are back and we are speaking with Don Mankin, one of the rare adventurers that gets on the air, tells everybody about his trips with his wife, by himself, with other people. We'll be hearing about that in a moment, and writes about. And of course, you can go and read his book, National Geographic's Riding the Hula Hula to the Arctic Ocean. And this is adventure traveling. Now, I want to talk about something you had mentioned. You said that you went on a trip with a 24-year-old relative. To me, I call that a mentoring opportunity. And you may know that skip generation or two-generation tours are now becoming the big thing. It's often grandparents and grandkids, but it could be what you did. What was that like? And was there a mentoring opportunity? You know, you say as you get older, you get wise. But who wants to hear from you? Maybe you got a chance to be wise.
Well, this was interesting. Now, I don't have any kids. I have nephews. I have a grandnephew, and he at the time of the trip he was about 24 years old. He lives in Florida, and he was a dude. The 24-year-old, college guy, drinking beer, going out to Las Vegas to gamble and stuff like that. But he always expressed an interest in the trips that I was doing. So nobody in my family is really all that interested in the kind of trips that I do. They go on cruises and they go to golf resorts. They're not really into adventure travel. But Aaron, my grandnephew, was always interested, and he was the one who brought up the idea of maybe doing a trip with me. So about 2 years ago, we talked about it, and he had a week off from work, and I suggested that he meet me in Phoenix, and I'd rent a car, and we'd drive up to the Grand Canyon, and from there we go to Canyon de Chelly, Monument Valley, Moab, and do some hiking in Arches and Canyonlands, and then Zion, and then back again. And he had never seen anything like this. He rarely had been out of Florida, maybe I think to New York and maybe to Las Vegas, but trips to Las Vegas, mostly in casinos. And it blew his mind. I mean, his reaction when we got to the rim of the Grand Canyon was, he was just like, no way, no way.
Right.
and other 24-year-old exclamations, which I'm not sure I remember. And it was. I mean, and my intention was, I wanted to shape him a little bit, and get him to think of life in something different than this kind of 24-year-old, yo bro, experiences. And it had an impact. And we talked about repeating it. The problem is that he has a new job. He only has 1 week off a year. And so it's sort of hard to figure out, where we might go next. But it's something we both keep in mind. And I look forward to traveling again with him. I mean, he's very different. He's there's the generational difference, there's a cultural difference, politically there's a difference, but it's great. It's great to bond with him and to open up his eyes to the world. And really, that's what I'm into. I want to open up his eyes to the world.
Yes, and the word bonding is a beautiful word. That is the word that came to mind as you were talking.
Yeah.
So my husband did take my son, and you're passing it forward. He took my son to Normandy, and it was it was a historic trip.
Sure.
The idea is looking at the history of it. But he learned to appreciate his own grandfather. He learned to appreciate his own freedom. And the result now, my son's 40 years old, is that his children, who are only 2 years old and 6 years old, have been to Europe 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So, you're passing it forward. You're giving somebody a taste, or as you say, opening their eyes. It's such a beautiful thing. Are you culturally curious, but you can't always travel? Or do you have a loved one that you are a caregiver for, and you'd love to see them travel, but they really cannot do so? Well, we have affiliated with Wowzitude. You might have read about it in Forbes magazine. It's the online real-time travel guide. You can actually visit places on your computer, on your telephone, and of course on your TV. Simply go to agelesstraveler.com, take a look at the travel products, and you will see a list under Wowzitude of some of the places you could have gone this week. For example, England, Rome, and all of the places that you feel you just might have missed because, gee whiz, they're so far away. How about traveling to Ecuador? And what about here in the USA? Well, Wowzitude is renowned for bringing real-time travel experiences to your home. And we've affiliated with them because, while we know you never want to stop traveling, sometimes you have to travel from your armchair. It's Wowzitude, the agelesstraveler.com travel product. Now I am back, and I'm really delighted to turn the tables. Everybody asks me, what's your favorite trip? Now, I am actually going on a trip. While you're listening to this, I will be somewhere probably in the south of France. But I'm starting that trip about 2 months before you hear this. So I'm on the road. And that road is a long one, starting from Madrid, going to Andorra, Greenland, Iceland. I call it my big European trip, and ending up in Germany and in Cannes. So people say to me, what's your favorite place? There's no way for me to answer that.
Yes, right.
But I don't care. I'm asking our guest, Don Mankin, anyway. So, right. Don, what's your favorite place?
Okay, well, there's probably 5 of them, but one of them for sure is tracking mountain gorillas in Uganda. And you could also do this in Rwanda. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing. You have to do some hiking, to get in to see the gorillas. But you get in and you have an hour to be with them. And basically, they're there and they're only a few feet away. And, at one point, my wife and I were actually sitting on the ground, just, resting a little bit. And an adolescent blackback, the silverbacks are the granddaddies, the heads of the clans. This is a blackback, so he wasn't quite as old. Walked right out of the bush, right to our right, walked in front of us, walked right past us. If I had stuck my foot out, I would have tripped him. And it was just mind-blowing to be among those animals. So that was clearly one of my favorites.
Let me interrupt here before you go to the other 4, because you just excited me so much. This is breaking news. Nobody will have known this except that you mentioned this. We have been invited, meaning our Ageless Traveler listeners, by the tourist board of Uganda to go and visit the gorillas. And I will be promoting our trip, which will take place in September 2025. So I'll be starting right now on this show. I was going to do it the next show, but because of you, I'm doing it right on this show, promoting our Ugandan gorilla trip. Now, here's what I'm so excited about. I know that there are 2 ways of seeing the gorillas. One is what you did, which is the usual traditional way. And then there is a different kind of habitat, which takes a little bit longer to walk. It is a little bit, of course, it's warm, even in September. It is a longer trek. There's no doubt about it, but just equally as safe. And because we are the ageless travelers, they are opening the doors to that trek, which is usually only offered, I get this, to people in their 20s. And I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We are ageless travelers. Some of us can make it. Some of us can't. So we'll have both options. And that's because not on my watch. If you can make the longer trip or the longer drive or the higher incline or the altitude, I'm going to make sure that you have access to it. So that is so exciting. And when you said to me it was your favorite, you're such an adventurer, I said, wow, this is perfect for us. Okay, now I did that. You go ahead with your other 4 favorites.
Well, I've been to Antarctica 3 times, and that's really one of my favorite places. One time, 2 times on a ship, but the first time I flew in on a Russian cargo plane, which landed in the interior, and spent 8 days in a tent in a camp in the interior of Antarctica. So that was, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It sure is.
I love Southeast Asia. I love Alaska. So, if we had another 3 hours, I'd go on and on about that. So, yeah. So I think places that begin with A,
right,
Asia,
that's what you like.
Asia, Alaska, Antarctica, and Africa.
Wonderful. We could start there. We'll get down to one of my favorite places, which is Zambia. Get down to Z. People overlook Zambia because they don't have the big 5. Zambia has what they call walking safaris. You don't go in jeeps, and you don't see the big 5. But the most extraordinary sight I have seen in the world of animal life is a giraffe getting up. I never saw a giraffe getting up. And like you with the gorilla, I was right in front of him. And it's just an amazing thing to see them get up on their feet. And yes, of course, I've seen many of them in zoos and even wonderful zoos, which, don't have too many bars, but there's nothing like seeing them in the wild, or the orangutans in Malaysia. I'd say those are the 2. Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah.
But I'm going to leave this. I was going to leave this with you. I hear, like myself, that most family members and even friends, the kinds of trips they take are not the curiosity trips like we take. They are the relaxation trips. And of course,
yes,
absolutely nothing wrong with that. But your male friends, do you find them traveling? Here's the statistics. The statistics is that 80% of travelers over the age of 60 are women, right? And it's not because, listen to this one. You'd say, well, sure, because women outlive men and they're solo. 63% of those women are married. The men don't want to go.
Yep.
Now, you got an explanation for that? Can you help us out on this one?
I've noticed that, like with trips that my wife and I take, and we'll run into like 2 women traveling together. And, they're married, but their husbands weren't that interested. And, this has happened more than once. And the explanation, I think you have to look at the differences between men and women as they age. And, I'm not an expert on this. Even though I have a background in psychology. So women age differently. They're more social. I remember when I was younger visiting my mother in Florida, and I would notice, like in the afternoons or during the day, the women would all be outside sitting by the pool talking to each other. And the men would if they ever showed up, they would just argue with each other. But most of the time they weren't even there. So I think it has something to do with women are more sociable. It's easier for them to bond with other women, and guys, I think, are a little bit more reluctant. And traveling, especially adventure travel, is a little bit difficult when you're older to do on your own. You want a companion, a wife, a husband, a friend. And I think that a lot of women are more willing to get out there and to try out new things, and men just get more and more conservative, as they get older.
So interesting, but the statistics prove it true. So I thank you so much, and you're one of the beacons that maybe will, what they say, the role model, something I think you don't want to be, but happen to be anyway, to get a lot of us, male, female, out there. And as I say to everybody, never stop traveling.